Hello everyone and welcome back to the Women's World Chess Championship match. It's game 12 and Alexandra Goryachkina, the challenger, is in a very difficult position. She needs to win on demand to keep the championship going and to take this championship into rapid tie breaks. Now, if you've been following the championship so far, you know that Wenjun took the lead, then Goryachkina retaliated, then Goryachkina took the lead, then Wenjun equalized, and then in game 10, Wenjun again took the lead. Game 11 ended in a draw, and now it's the final game of the match, unless Goryachkina is able to score a win. So a very similar situation like Kasparov versus Karpov, their famous match in 1987 in Seville. And Kasparov also needed to win on demand. So let's see what happens here. Goryachkina opens with d4. We have d5 by Wenjun, and now knight to c3. So similar to Kasparov, Goryachkina goes for an offbeat opening and puts Wenjun into a deep think. And here already on move 2, Wenjun took 20 minutes to decide on the next move, and she replied with knight to f6. And okay, this is definitely the best reply to this knight to c3 idea, which blocks the pawn. Usually you want to, of course, bring your pawn to c4, only then develop the knight. But here you need a win, and you can't just play anything. You know that Wenjun is very well prepared, as you've seen so far in the match. And immediately bishop to f4 by Goryachkina. Okay, we have e6 and now knight to b5, already threatening to capture on c7 with check. So it seems like, it's only move 4 you're threatening knight captures on c7 with check. Pretty much seems like playing for tricks, but a lot of very strong grandmasters have tried this idea with white, like Alexander Botrynik, also Kirill Alexeyenko, one of the candidates of the 2020 candidates tournament, and the list continues. So here, knight to a6, you need to defend the c7 pawn, and now e3, continuing development with bishop to b4 check, forcing c3, well, not forcing, but provoking c3, and now the knight does not have the c3 square to retreat to. So bishop back to e7, and now a4. So you can retreat the knight to a3 without blocking your a pawn. So basically what Goryachkina is trying to do is keep as many pieces on the board for as long as possible and try and create as many complications as possible. So here we have castles, and now, like I mentioned, Vladislav Kovalev won a very nice game with h3. Here we have bishop to d3 by Goryachkina, and now c6, pushing the knight back. Knight to a3, and now c5. Now you either waste a move with knight to b5 to get the knight to a more active square, which was played in Alexander Botrynik versus Dmitry Fingerov in 2017, where Botrynik scored a very nice victory. But here we have knight to f3 by Goryachkina, and it is as of move 10 that we have a completely new game. So let's see what happens. We have knight to e4, now preparing f5, the knight is excellently placed on e4, we have h3 and f5. It does weaken the e6 pawn a bit, but doesn't seem like white has any ways of exploiting that. So knight back to b5, and now c4, pushing the bishop further back. Bishop captures on e4, not interested in retreating. So captures, and now knight to e5. So okay, the knight is now on an excellent square. We have knight to b8 by Wenjun, preparing now to kick away the knight with a6, and here Goryachkina castles. We have a6, pushing the knight back to a3, and now knight to d7, developing and maybe even considering a trade here on e5. We have knight back to c2, and now queen to e8, not allowing this queen to go to h5, but also putting pressure on the a4 pawn if the rook ever moves. So f3, busting open the center. We have knight captures on e5, bishop captures on e5, and now bishop to d7. Just continuing development, the rook can now come into the game, and now knight to e1. So far nothing really happening. It's hard to even imagine that white is playing for a win here, but in a situation, if you've ever seen the interview with Kasparov about that game, he said that, you should just check out that interview about that last game, how to play for a win when you simply must win the game. So queen to h5 now. If captures, then you can trade queens on the spot. So king h2, improving the position of the king, and now e captures on f3. We have knight captures, and now this is a pretty bad bishop with all these pawns and light squares, but if you can get it, for example, to g6 and maybe put it to e4, or maybe even d3 in some lines, could be very dangerous. So bishop to e8, and now queen to e1 by Goryachkina. Preparing e4, which will either allow e captures on d5, which will weaken black's center, or if black captures, then you will weaken the c4 pawn and you will be able to make some progress. So queen to g6, preventing that, and then now bishop back to f4, clearing the e5 square for the knight. We have queen to e4 now, not allowing knight e5 to come with an attack on the queen, and now a5, paralyzing the queen side. Now the rook can also move, since you don't have to worry about, for example, bishop captures on a4. We have h6 by black, and now knight to d2, kicking the queen back. So just knight e2, the queen has to move, now preparing e4, queen back to h7, and now e4. And now here you could either wait for d captures on e5, which isn't all that great for black, since you open up lines for white. So d captures on e4 was played, and then now before recapturing bishop to e5. So what do you do here? Well, there are a few things to consider. You are up a pawn for the moment, but this is a weak pawn and this is a weak pawn. So first, rook to c8, defending the c4 pawn. There's no good way to defend the e4 pawn. We have rook captures on f8, bishop captures on f8, and now queen to e2, putting another attacker towards the c4 pawn. And now you could play bishop b5. Yes, this defends it. However, the knight captures on e4, and you've regained the material balance, and the black has a pawn bishop, so not really something you're interested in. What's best for black is actually to go bishop to e7, but this is not an easy decision to make. And after, let's say, knight captures on e4, now you bring the bishop to c6, and after the knight moves, now you bring it to d5. So now from here, bishop defends c4, bishop defends e6, bishop defends b7, and also bishop attacks g2. So this is one good bishop. So that's how you should approach it. You should put it here, and after the e4 pawn is gone, you gain access to this diagonal. But Goryachkina, Wenjun finds a different plan, an active one. She plays e3. Point being that if queen captures, then you defend with queen to d3, offer a queen trade. You could get a very nice passed pawn on d3, and with the bishop pair, should be very nice. However, after this e3 move, Goryachkina plays knight captures on c4, and now bishop to b5. Okay, attacking the knight, sort of pinning the attacked piece, and now b3, defending. With queen to e4, now adding another defender to the e3 pawn. So what do you play here? Feel free to pause the video and try to find how to continue this game with white while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, there is only one move that gives white an advantage, and that is rook to f1. Rook to f1 with the threat of rook to f4, kicking away the black queen and then just gobbling up the e3 pawn. If you trade, trading doesn't do anything for you, because after captures there's also captures, and then, well, a lot of things are hanging here. It would just be winning for black pretty much. So like I said, rook to f1, the threat is rook to f4. So here Wenjun goes back with the queen to c6. It adds a third attacker to the c4 square, but now just queen captures on e3, and now you have a problem. You cannot start grabbing material with captures and captures because of queen f4 now going after queen to f7, and the bishop here prevents anyone from coming to help out along the 7th rank, because well, the bishop guards the c7 square. So here after king h7 you'd see queen f7, rook f6 is coming. There's nothing to do. You cannot move the bishop because of mate. You cannot bring any pieces to help out with the defense. So you could try something like rook d8, but rook f6. And now if queen c8 or something, it's hard to even make a move. g4. This is crucial because it will allow queen to h5 after the rook is sacrificed on h6. And here there are just no moves. Whatever you play, let's say rook d7, rook captures on h6. You cannot go here, you cannot go here, you have to capture, and now queen to h5 will be mate. So if you start going after material, you're basically getting mated. So here, queen back to e8. Wenjun brings the queen back to help out with the defense. Queen to e2 now, just keeping the material, so not allowing black to grab that pawn back. Queen to g6, and now comes rook to f3, with ideas of rook to g3, which will put a lot of pressure on the g7 pawn. King to h7, and now comes queen to f2. This is a beautiful move, queen f2, because here, okay, you're up a pawn, but how do you ever unpin here, unless you do this? So rook to f3 followed by queen to f2 is an excellent maneuver of how to unpin, because now you're threatening rook captures on f8. So here, bishop back to c6, attacking the rook, and now rook g3, attacking the queen. Queen f5, offering a queen trade. Now queen e2. Again, what do you do here? We have rook to d8, and here comes knight to e3, pushing back the queen. We have queen to f7, and now again, this is the most critical position ever. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the hidden supercomputer move while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding such a supercomputer move. I know it's always easier when I tell you there's a hidden supercomputer move, but either way, congratulations. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's actually d5. d5 is a hard move to find because there's just too much to take into account. Goryachkina played queen to d3 check. It's a similar idea, although it's much better if you combine it with the d5 for the following reason. Now, with the d5, there's not a lot of things you can do. If rook captures, then knight captures rook. If bishop captures, then you play queen d3 check after the king moves, or g6, doesn't really matter. c4 wins the bishop. You cannot move the bishop because the rook hangs on d8. So after d5, your only good option is pawn captures on d5, and this is crucial because here you've vacated the f5 square for the white knight, but even more important, the bishop no longer has access to the f3 square, which will help you bring a rook into the attack. So here, after e captures on d5, there are some ideas you could try, but well, whatever you do, queen d3 check is important. And now, if king goes back, let's say king to h8, or let's say king to g8. It doesn't really matter. Here you have knight to g4, and now you're threatening knight captures here with check, knight captures here. Sorry, knight f6 check. There are so many ideas here. If you allow knight f6 check, the king moves to h8, and then just queen to h7 is mate. So not much you can do here. And the other line, for example, after queen to d3 check, which is g6, now this comes into play. Again, knight to g4, you know, with knight to f6 check coming, bishop to g7, and now rook to f3. This is the point why d5 was so strong, because now the bishop cannot capture rook. And now after queen to e7, now you just play captures, and now queen to f1, threatening rook f7 to win the queen. And after rook d7, doesn't really matter which is the only move, just check, king h8, you pick up the rook, bishop captures, and now rook f8 check. King h7, and here rook f7 wins the queen. It's game over. So that's why after queen to f7, d5, it's a monstrosity of a move. But of course, who would find that? So queen to d3 check. It's a similar idea. The problem is it doesn't go all the way because the bishop covers f3 square. So here, of course, Wenjun does not move the king. g6 is played, and now you can't go into the same line because you don't have access to f3. So rook to g4 was played. Now Goryachkina wants to make the rook lift via rook to f4. So bishop to g7. Bishop captures with, sorry, not queen captures, king captures was played, and now knight to c4. Now the knight is coming to e5, and well, then there will be just so much pressure on the g6 pawn. So bishop to b5 first, not allowing this, and now queen to g3, unpinning. We have bishop captures on c4, you cannot allow this knight to reach e5, otherwise it's over. B captures on c4, and now rook to d7. just adding another defender to the 7th rank, and now rook to e4. So here we're basically in an endgame with Goryachkina being up a pawn. So queen f6 and now queen to e3, putting pressure on the pawn here. Now of course you cannot go to e7 because of d5, so rook to d6 and now c5, pushing the rook back. Rook to c6, you have to keep an eye on the pawn here. Now king g1, before deciding on what to do, first improving the position of the king. We have queen f5 and now rook f4, pushing the queen back. Queen g5, now h4, queen has to go back. Now queen e5 check, king to g8 and now rook f6, putting pressure on g6. King h7 defending, but now h5, a very important attacking move which clears the path for the rook to the h6 pawn. G captures, now queen f4, going after this, and also just rook to f7 wins the queen. So e5 by Wenjun, there really aren't any good moves here. So queen captures was played, king to g8 and now queen g6 check. We have king to h8, or if you block queen g7, doesn't really matter, just queen e8 check, and now, well, you just lose king here. Let's say rook f7 wins the queen. So after queen g6 check, king h8, and now we have queen captures on h5 with check, king g8, and now queen to g5 check. And it was in this position that Wenjun resigned the game, and a most important victory for Alexandra Goryachkina, who again equalizes, and they are now going into rapid tiebreaks, which will be played tomorrow. So really impressive stuff. Here you resign because you're just down too much material. Doesn't really matter. Whatever you do, you can just trade queens, captures, you trade rooks, and then play d5. It's a clean win. Captures, and now this just gets the pawn up the board. There's no playing this whatsoever. So yeah, after queen g5, Wenjun resigns, and what a game and what a win by Goryachkina. Like Kasparov against Karpov in Sevilla 1987, an offbeat opening. Then at some point Goryachkina, like Kasparov, started playing for an attack, and then in the end it was just pointless. Like Karpov, Wenjun resigned, and it was just beautiful. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. We are gonna cover the tiebreaks as well. Hopefully there will be some crazy games there, as of course there's less time to think about the moves. I would like to thank John Bettinger, Timo Salo, and Andre Georgi for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Women's World Chess Championship, the coverage of the Tata Steel. Perhaps we're going to check up on some games from the Gibraltar Chess Festival, and of course continuing the Morphy saga and checking up on your wonderful suggestions. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.